Welcome, LilyPod listeners and LilyTube viewers to another edition of LilyPod and LilyTube. And we have some special guests today. We're excited about this, and Cathy can introduce them. So take it away.
Eric Pabst. Am I saying that right? Yep. Eric Pabst is a man of God, a life coach, and a computer programmer. He has 5 children from a previous marriage of 24 years. Through God's help and life coaching tools, he gradually came to understand the root cause of marital issues. Unfortunately, by then, it was too late to fix his marriage. He went from feeling very insecure about himself to finding peace of mind, and from obsessing about meeting expectations to living in each moment. He also went from being crippled by fear to feeling safe without defensiveness, and from putting up walls and masks to deeply connecting with others. Over time, he has gathered and developed and refined a set of tools that are powerful and simple. In his desire to help others, he has coached many people to effectively move from feeling anxious, inadequate, and discouraged, and frustrated to finding peace, fulfillment, and connection. Syra Pabst, his wife, is a mother of 2, a photographer, and she is obsessed with learning God's higher truths. She's been divorced for 15 years after a 5-year abusive marriage. Syra was first diagnosed with breast cancer in October 2019. She went through the whole bit: chemo, mastectomy, radiation, and reconstruction, and was declared NED, no evidence of disease, in 2020. However, she just found out in September that it has returned and metastasized to her bones, showing up in her sternum, 9th rib, and throughout her vertebrae, hip, bones, and some other areas. It is extremely aggressive, and the doctors say it will eventually take her, but she is a fighter and she will fight hard. She puts her trust in God and is stubborn with her joy. She has created a living list, like a bucket list, but less depressing. One is to write a book that will help people from what she has learned. She has been able to check off a few of those items thanks to the efforts of some friends, such as singing with the Tabernacle Choir and fixing her violin so she can pick it up again. Eric and Syra met in March of 2022 online as audience members in the LDS Singles Flameless Fireside podcast. Jeff and Cathy Teichert, oh, that's us. They were an important part of the path that led them to each other.
We might ask more about that in a minute.
Yep. She moved from Virginia to Utah, and they got married in August of this year. Well, actually, I guess when this releases, it will be 2023. So in August of 2022. Okay. They have a beautiful relationship that they call Fog 9, which is like Cloud 9, but beautifully anchored to the ground. Bringing safety to their relationship is very important to both of them, as well as being deeply connected emotionally, intellectually, physically, and spiritually. They are planning to be sealed on New Year's Eve in the Washington, D.C. temple. In the future, Eric plans to adopt her 2 children from the previous marriage and be sealed to them as well. He and Syra want to change the world by helping people learn how to overcome obstacles in their relationships and deepen their connection. They hope for the miracle of being able to grow old despite her cancer.
We hope and pray for that too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to get to know you better and to have our audience benefit from what you have learned in your life journey so far.
Yeah, it was fun to kind of watch from a distance the way your relationship unfolded and happened.
Yeah, so just for the benefit of our audience, I don't think we even knew we were involved until recently when we were on a meeting together and you guys like, oh, you were part of our love story. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Okay, so after I got divorced, so I got divorced just in December of 2021. And so I started getting on Facebook, dating, meeting different people. And one of the people that I met, I was talking with, and I'd mentioned that I was a life coach, and she's like, oh, I have a life coach too. And oh, you should get on there. They have this really cool like Facebook group and you should join and stuff. And it was your guys' group, the Lily group. And so so I got on, and there was mention of you guys having written a book, your intentional courtship book.
There's a plug for you.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Thank you.
And we hope Syra carries through and writes her book too that was talked about.
Yes. So then Sherry, Sherry, sorry,
Sherry.
that's right. Yeah, so Sherry Braithwaite, she has she had a book club to go over your book. And I thought,
Right.
well, that's cool. That'd be cool to join. But I was like, I don't have the book yet. And they're like, oh, that's okay. You can just join. I was like, cool. I'll be able to hear about the book. Don't even have the book, but I can, can learn about it and then, have an interesting conversation about this whole being single scene that I'm just totally brand new to after 24 years. So I was like, this is perfect. So I get on there and doing the book club. And then she gets interviewed on the LDS Flameless Fireside podcast, which is the one that we met on.
They're both audience members in the Flameless Fireside podcast. So it was kind of a trail, and it started with you guys. And so you started him on his path to meet me. And so we were both audience members, and I was a regular on the Flameless Fireside. Celeste and Everett are two of my close friends. And so
And we're doing an interview with them for
I
2020.
think I remember seeing that,
Yeah.
which I'm excited about because they are just the best people in the world.
They're
And another great newlywed couple.
Yeah. So I was a regular and he was a newbie. He was his first night. And so he came on, and after the podcast, we get to turn on our video and our audio and chat because it's, it's a bunch of singles and everything. So we can socialize. It's called the after party. And so when they did that, I did my usual, I'm addicted to making friends. And so I'm like scrolling through, trying to see who's new because I want to make friends, right? So I'm scrolling through, and I see his video and I'm like, ooh, he's cute. And then so I was like, and I'm a just silly girl. I just love playing around and stuff. So in the chat, I put, who's the new Eric hottie? And and it made him smile really big. And as soon as he smiled, I was gone. Like I was so sold. It was like his smile said so much about him, not just, he was cute, but like it's so much about his personality and who he was. I can't explain it. It's a gift that I have. And I was kind of sold at that point. So, but yeah.
Love at first sight on the Flameless Fireside after party.
Well, it was for me.
It wasn't flameless that night.
Yeah, it took me a little bit more time to be in love thing, but
Yeah, because he was actually, had his eyes set on somebody else at the time, and he was kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with that, but he didn't want to like start the process all over again. So he wasn't looking, and he told me that right off. And so I said, okay, friends then, and so we talked, for like the next 4 days straight. And in those 4 days, we just went deep, fast, and connected. And yeah.
Isn't it interesting how sometimes we don't develop at the same pace? I think often we don't. Like,
We were miles off.
And that's actually something that I like to tell people that are dating, because I joke about being an expert in dating because I've done it so much in my life,
15 years single in between.
Divorced, and then the single before the 5 years I was married. So one thing that I always like to tell people, and so this is kind of like advice to single people, is that if you do have an interest in somebody, you can increase your chances best by accepting what they have to offer. So if it's just being a friend, then accept their friendship and revel in it and cherish it, build it and everything, because through that can open other opportunities. And maybe it won't, but that's the best way that you can increase your chances of doing it.
Well, not only that, but it makes being single so much more pleasant when we have
It
friends.
does. And it's so much more fun because I figured I can't lose. I either end up with something more or I end up with an incredible friend, and there's no loss.
right.
Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so yeah, so like when I was, so this other person, I was with her for a little bit, and then she ran into an old boyfriend or whatever, and wanted to see where that would go. And so I was, so I was kind of like in limbo, I was just kind of like, I'm just gonna wait and see, see what happens with that. And all this. So I wasn't looking, and I, here's Syra, and plus she's from Virginia, and I'm like in Utah, like
He was
that's like
like,
forever away from me, as far as distance. And so I was like, but I was really lonely. I was just like, I was just like, I'd been dating really heavy, several people, and trying to get out there and see what I could find, and what kind of a partner or match I could find, and everything. And so it was like 3 weeks of not dating like at all. And so then to have somebody to even just talk to was like just really nice.
that wasn't
Yeah,
like
that
dating or
connection
nothing.
makes a lot of difference in
Yeah.
your level of happiness.
Yeah.
Syra, I want to ask you, I know Eric was pretty recently divorced, and you were like 15 years ago or something like that. So how did you maintain your hope, your joy, and all of that through that 15-year wilderness period?
I will say it was one of the hardest things to do that I've ever done, even more than facing cancer. Because, you go a few years, you start thinking, oh, what's going on? Something wrong with me. 5 years, hits, and you're like, wow, I guess I'm one of the late bloomers or whatever, the latecomers. And 10 years, but by 15 years, you're going, something is wrong, or I am not supposed to get married in this life, And I had this mentality that my odds were not going to go up. My chances were not going to go up if I didn't get out there and do the footwork. I didn't get out there and start dating. So I literally I looked for every opportunity, and with every situation, I was determined to learn something, even if it didn't go anywhere. So that, and I told my husband all the time that when I dated somebody, I also tried to preserve something from that relationship. So even if the relationship didn't work, I tried to, if I could, remain friends with the person. I tried to make it a very amicable, split up or whatever. So that, and I fully expressed my respect for them and my gratitude and everything, so that I could do that, and pull value. And then those 15 years doesn't feel like such a loss or such a price or a cost, and the biggest thing that helped me through, besides just focusing on trying to improve myself, that was one of the biggest things, was staying close to the Lord. Because the Lord was the one that, even with the situations, I've had a couple of situations where I dated a guy, one in particular, where I was like, there was nothing wrong with him. There was no red flags, nothing. I still think he's a great guy, but the Lord said no. And it was so frustrating, because I was going, Heavenly Father, why? It's always no. There's always something wrong. There's always something missing. And so,
did you ever feel like you were constantly in a Joseph Smith situation where you're looking for truth and God just, nope, not that one, none of them?
It's funny that you say that, because the answer is yes. And I actually went on my mission to Rochester, New York, where it's so like,
that's very close to Palmyra.
Yeah. Well, my area was Palmyra. So
Right.
I was one of the site sisters that gave the tours, at all the historical sites and stuff. And so my life, we joke about this, that my life actually, in a much, much smaller way, parallels Joseph Smith's life. So when you said that, I'm like going, yes.
You're like, when is this new religion / new man that's like,
yes,
going to come finally? Because I do remember having that moment in church when I was like, join none of them. I'm like, okay,
yes.
Scratch everything I'm doing right now and start over again.
That's exactly, I actually had not thought about that aspect, but that is exactly what it was like. Every time it was like, scratch it and start over again, and it was so disheartening. And there were times when there was even one time, I'll admit, that I found myself praying and screaming at God, because I just didn't understand. But if I had known, if I'd only known what he was preparing me for, I would have been like, I'm good. I am good.
I mean, I think that was the hard, I was about 9 years. And I think that was the hard part for me, is oh, if I could know the end from the beginning, but the future is
Well,
always in motion, like Master Yoda said.
except if you get that Joseph Smith like parallel, what happened with him? What if he had just joined one of those religions because he's like, well, I'm just sick of looking.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the church we have now for all of us, right?
Yep.
So it's almost kind of like a little motivator when you know that like history, if it were to repeat itself in my life, means whatever I'm being asked to wait for is worth waiting for.
Right.
And there's a purpose in it.
You know, I came really
Isaac waited,
close
what,
to
7 years? No, not Isaac. Jacob waited 7 years for
Oh, like Rebecca or whoever.
Rebecca, and Ephraim and Manasseh came from that union. Probably affects all of us.
Although at least he knew who. Like, I think when you don't know,
Yeah, that's
who,
yeah.
what am I waiting for? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it was really tough because like before Eric, there was a gentleman I dated, but before him, I was in a very, very serious relationship in which we were planning on getting married. I applied to have my sealing canceled and everything. And I still feel that he is an incredible man, but I have found out that Eric, it matches me so much better. And so when I think back and I think how close I came, if I had stuck with that or whatever, and it's a long story, but if something had come from that, if we had gotten married, it still would have been incredible. But I know that he matches me so much better and that this was supposed to happen the way that it happened, And so I'm just like, it kills me how close I came to missing out on this if I had not listened to the Spirit or said, you know what? No, I want to be married. And we all get stuck in that as singles. We get in that, we don't want to be alone. It sucks, And so it's hard being patient, but, and then one of the other things that helped me out during those 15 years is staying engaged in my life. So like a lot of times when singles are feeling alone and stuff, it's hard not to get lost in being alone. But if you dive into your life, dive into getting your education, into your family, extending your family in other ways, or whatever it is, you're improving yourself while you're waiting, or while you're in the process, you're actually being prepared, because
I was just going to say that's something we emphasize all the time in ministering to mid-singles is, you're not just waiting around to get married. You're
right.
Whether you can be successfully married is going to depend a lot on how you develop during that time,
And
whether
when
it's long or short.
And if we can consider it a gift, like a gift of preparation and a gift of even figuring out how to love ourselves so that we know how to receive love.
Yeah.
We know how to even go to the source, which is God,
and how to appreciate it. Because that's one thing that both of us, as hard as it is to have gone through our separate scenarios, they're two ends of the spectrum, but they're both very, very painful situations, very hard. But sure. I wouldn't trade it for anything because it's made us who we are, and being ready for each other, and not only recognizing, like you said, but appreciating, being able to appreciate each other and what we are bringing to this relationship. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah.
By the way, before we go too much further, I need to correct myself. It wasn't Rebecca, it was Rachel. Rebecca was the mother of Jacob, who worked 7 years thinking he was going to marry Rachel, and he had to marry Leah, and then worked 7 more years. So about the same amount of time of waiting as you had, except he knew the end result.
That is actually one of my favorite scriptural stories.
Yeah.
Well, I think the moral of your story,
relate to it.
Yeah.
I think the moral of your story is that, like Joseph Smith, when we're single, if our dating process and figuring out our life requires patience, that there's reason and purpose in it, and that it's part of our path.
Right.
And that the time in which we're single between relationships is a gift to develop ourselves.
And as invaluable. I mean, before I met him, I decided that I was going to, I didn't stop dating. I kept dating, but I decided that I wanted to start getting involved in bringing single adults together, because spending 15 years in the single adult world, I have a passion for helping all these single adults get together, and especially the ones who can't afford it or situationally have a difficult time. So I dove into
Sure,
that. I
me too.
realized that God wanted me to do this, and a lot of the things that prepared me for those prepared me for this.
Right. So
But
Eric, I want to ask you something real quick. Now your divorce was relatively more recent. I know there had to have been troubles leading up to it and all that as well, but how were, and we've discussed this between ourselves a time or two, but how were you able to make the transition as quickly as you did to being ready for another love in your life and, you know, to move forward?
that's a
Good
great
question.
question. Yeah. Yeah. Divorce is really hard for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Really hard. And there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of things that play into it, into the leading up to it and the cause and everything. I personally had just, throughout my life, really, a while back, I've done a lot of work like you kind of mentioned recently, but I had just a lot of years of really a lot of insecurity, fears of rejection, fears of failure. I was judgmental of people, and I had a lot of anxiety, just a lot of not being myself, not being able to be comfortable in my own skin, not being able to show up, really being present. And so with my situation, when we became separated, I got to work on myself. I thought that I was trying to fix my marriage at the time, and that's what my vision was at the time. But I was working on, okay, what is going on? What happened? Where did, what are the root causes, and how do I fix that? What do I do to become better, to not be so defensive, to be more genuine, to be more present? And God, like 4 days after the separation, I would say is the most important day of my life spiritually, like more important than my mission, more important than my baptism. It was amazing that day, August 10th, 2020. God really made it clear to me that I needed to connect with him every day to the point of hearing him speak to me. I call it checking my divine email, my daily email from God. And so, take like an hour and a half, 2 hours in the mornings. Like, it was a lot of work to get out of where I was at with my anxiety and insecurities, but to connect with him. And I use my journal and I write down, okay, God, and I put what he told me, and I would have this foundation like come under my feet. I would just have this peace come over me. I'd be like, okay, now I'm ready for this day. Let's go to work, let's do this. And I had a job that was flexible enough to allow me to do that. So essentially every single day he was walking me through the process. He led me to tools, he led me to ways of thinking about it. He led me to, what my target was, and just led me through it. And I wrote a lot of these things down because I wanted to not just be beneficial to me, but I wanted to be able to help other people.
He's so good at it, journaling.
And
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell our audience the thing I admire most about Eric. In this process, he wasn't looking at how do I blame my former wife. At least most of his effort was, how can I change? How can I be a better me?
If I can go one step further, I also noticed that the way in which you're saying it is very non-shaming too, because people can get stuck in one or the other, or maybe flip-flop between both, and neither are useful. And I can tell that even though you're saying I had anxiety, I had judgment, I felt insecure, that those aren't part of you now, because you're talking about it very non-shamingly. Like, you're just saying, this is what I used to feel. and you can clearly don't anymore. Like, that's really amazing.
When he talks
is.
about how he used to be, and I believe it, you know, but when he talks about it, it's actually, I have to really, it's a little hard for me to imagine it because he's so not like that now, you know, and I believe it was because he dove in and did the work to fix what he could do. And one of the things I loved about him was that he was very honest and upfront about who he was when he was married, you know, about the things that he contributed to their marital problems and stuff, and that he didn't just shame her all the time, you know. And I think that says a lot about somebody's character, and it takes a lot of strength because there's a lot of pain and there's always two sides, and there's a, you know, and that just really impressed me, and it just made him so much more attractive.
And when you
Yeah.
live in the mid-singles community long enough, you know that when somebody is divorced and they aren't bagging on their former, it's not because there aren't things that could be complained about. It's because they've done work. And it's because they've chosen a path of peace.
Yep.
You know, we had on this program, we had Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife a year or something ago, and we love her. I mean, personally and professionally, she's just an awesome person. But anyway, we asked her what was the most important thing to look for when you're dating after a divorce, and she said someone who is self-reflective, who has self-awareness and can look at their own thoughts and behavior and self-confront. And she, of course, added very emphatically, you have to be trying to be that kind of person as well. And that's really the intentionality about that is a big factor in being able to beat the odds in a second or third marriage.
Yeah, we teach that all the time, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So, you know, having judgmental thoughts and having expectations are, I believe, the root cause of every relationship issue. Like it is pervasive and far worse of a pandemic than COVID. Like it's just everywhere.
So destructive.
And, you know, and we're, you know, we all experience the recipient side of that, of people expecting or judging us, and it causes a lot of suffering. And you know, when we're in that suffering, it's really hard not to spread that suffering.
Yes.
You know, there's this
Hurt
saying,
people hurt people.
yeah, hurt people. And
Sorry.
so, no, that's great. Yeah. So,
Jumping is good.
no, I love it. You know, the episode, you know, we're so on board with so many things. And so, you know, anybody in my life who, you know, maybe where I used to be really judgmental of it, I was like, okay, you know what, they're hurting.
Yeah.
You know, how can I approach them with compassion and curiosity?
Yeah.
And safety, help them feel safe, felt and understood. And, you know, anytime that, you know, they're in a place where they're willing to accept that, you know, it's healing for them, and it's a beautiful opportunity for me, and vice versa.
Compassion and curiosity are two big.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say safety was something that we both brought to each other, which is, I think, why in 4 days we were able to dive deep fast, because we brought our own safety to the table, you know, and that was one of the things we found very appealing about each other was how safe we felt.
And I'd love to dive into the safety.
We connected over that too.
I just was going to say compassion and curiosity are big coaching words.
Yes.
And I heard a definition of compassion the other day that went something like this, that it's where suffering is met with love and stays loving.
Oh,
Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful.
Yeah. And then curiosity is when we're willing to be aware of ourselves and to even maybe question our thoughts and our behaviors and be willing to shift them to better serve us and our relationships. And it sounds like you did that. I love that you called it spiritual email. It's like, I'm going to check in with my spiritual self first, and then the rest of the day kind of takes care of itself. It sounds like that's kind of how you experienced it, right?
Yeah, it was. And it was incredibly life-changing. Literally, like I said, it's the most important spiritual day of my life. It is so amazing to have God help people walk you through things because he's the best at everything. He's the best computer programmer, he's the best life
Yeah.
coach, he's the best dad, he's the best husband. Like he's
Why
the
not
best.
tap into such
Yeah.
incredibly perfect resource, right?
Yeah,
The perfect king.
I love it.
And it's
I love
not
it. So
just that.
spiritual email, we can all kind of create our own spiritual email we check every day.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask
Absolutely.
Eric about something that he touched on earlier or alluded to, but one of his favorite terms is self-blinding judgments.
Yes.
So give us a definition of that and tell us how it helps, when you're really stuck or whatever.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so self-blinding judgment. So it's really a simple way to think of it is just judgmental thoughts, but I really like the concept of self-blinding. So when Christ taught about, you can't remove the mote from your neighbor's eye if you have a beam in your own eye, that's a really good visual, right? So I imagine we have this beam in our face that says, he is lazy or she is, controlling or whatever it is. And that in big black marker, right? In your face, you can't see the other
Can't
person
see.
at that point. They're no longer a human being. They're dehumanized.
And it goes from just being a judgment to a blinding judgment, a judgment that changes how we see things, That's why that self-blinding is so important.
It looks like a beam, even if it's a mote, because it's on your eye.
Yeah, it's
You can't see
objects in
past.
your eye are closer than they appear.
Right, or bigger. Yeah. So
bigger.
when you do something to remove it, and one way is to pray to God and plead for him to remove that judgment from your face. Another one that I found is just very stepwise, straightforward, and predictably doable in like an hour usually, is inquiry. And it's from Byron Katie on thework.com. I've simplified the approach just a little bit, kind of tailored it a little bit to how I like to do it, but it is just an amazing tool that, after doing it about 30 times, while I was still married, I realized that what I was doing was, being codependent, being so dysfunctional. And then after about 100 times, I've achieved basically peace of mind. Like, it is so rare that I have a negative thought at all about myself or anyone. I just feel so free. And when I do have one, it's like, oh, I know exactly how to handle this,
And doesn't it shift to a place of acceptance of yourself and others?
Oh, yeah, it's easy acceptance and even connection, right? Safety and connection. And I mean, between Syra and I, it's like, we just adore each other. It's like,
Adore.
like what I wanted my whole life, like was for acceptance. And with where I was at in my marriage, I could never feel accepted. And it was just really hard. But with Syra, like, she accepts me, like, of course. And it's like, but she adores me. And we just adore each other. We just can't talk about how much we love each other and how much we see in each other. And it's just so beautiful.
And words don't ever seem to be enough either. And I have to add on that like, he's always wanted this, but a lot of the reason why he's able to find it is not just because I offer it to him, but because he did that work so that he could accept it too.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that in his previous marriage, there was a lot of times where, she tried to, or there were instances where he could have, but he didn't know how, and that's what I love about his inquiry step process, is that it doesn't just tell you this is what you need to do. It tells you how, it shows you how and walks you through it. So that you can
have you walk us through a bit, just like a really kind of a quick snapshot for our listeners. But I wanted to mention that blinding judgments with the beam in the eye and dehumanizing, it's almost like with the anatomy of peace idea, that when you, what's the word, when you
have a heart at war.
Yeah, but what do you do when you have a heart at war? You are objectifying. Like, that's the dehumanization process, where like, you're no longer a person who I care about. You're an obstacle in my way of getting what I want, or you are
The means of getting what I want. Yeah.
And if you're only that, you're no longer like someone I need to treat with gentleness.
Yeah.
You no longer have feelings and desires anymore.
Well, and let me interpret what Eric said a minute ago. And if I'm wrong about this, please correct me or comment however you see fit. But it almost strikes me that you couldn't really be accepted by someone else, or at least receive that acceptance before you could accept your own self.
Amen.
And that if you were really codependent and you were, and I'm extrapolating, but you were trying to get that acceptance from your former wife, maybe applying pressure or other forms of imitation love, manipulation, whatever it may be, that if you're trying to push the issue of, you got to accept me, you married me, you know, if we're trying to do that, it seems like we're pushing away the very thing that we
That
want.
we want the most.
And then if we're open and we let people make their choices and we're at peace about it, we're in a much better place to be accepted because it's being freely offered.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really talk necessarily about specifics in our marriage,
No.
but you know, having it is so common with so many things. Like we self-sabotage, right?
Yep.
And if we, you know, whenever we're blaming someone else, usually, like, inquiry actually is a beautiful process, which is empowering, but it does turn any blame you're placing on anyone to taking your own accountability. And it is, and it's sometimes hard to swallow, but it is so beautiful, because then it becomes within your realm of power,
It really
because you
does.
can't change them, right? You can only change yourself. But as soon as you can say, oh, I have a part in this, I contribute in a major way.
I have control. It gives
Mhm.
you, it actually frees you of the things that you are oppressed by other people's expectations or judgments or whatever. So you can actually free yourself in the process.
It takes you out of self-pity and victim to being in a place of power and, you know, empowerment, basically. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, tell us more about the inquiry process. I'm familiar with Byron Katie. I've read her book. It's been a while, but I really love the concept of loving what is, just simply because what is what we're living in. I mean, it's kind of like Syra said in her bio, she's stubborn about her joy. And how are we joyful? It's when we love what is, because it is, right? And really her work is all about that, right?
Yeah.
So tell us how you came up, like, with your own, like, kind of condensed version of inquiry based on that.
So what Byron Katie has is the sheet called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, and you fill it out, and it walks you through to kind of understand your frustration or whatever you're going through, and then for each sentence in that worksheet you answer 5 questions. So she calls it 4 questions, and turnarounds I just call them 5 questions.
Okay.
And I just basically kind of skip the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet and just, what's the sentence? What is it that's causing you suffering? What is the thing that triggers that emotion in you? You know,
And that's the most important part, is to make sure that sentence that you, that thought and judgment that you want to change is accurate. Because, like, you want to make sure that it really resonates with you as what is causing you pain, because that's what makes it so effective.
So what triggers suffering in this relationship or this situation?
yeah. And you don't, it's hard to necessarily think of it in that, is that as the question, what's causing the suffering, but kind of what is it that's driving you crazy? You know, what is, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh, they should be listening to me. They should be being responsible. You know,
My mom should not demand that I pay attention to her right then and do what she says right at that very moment.
Notice all of your sentences have shoulds or shouldn'ts.
Exactly.
and that's usually an easy way to if you can come up with a sentence with should or shouldn't, that's usually a really good one to grab onto. There's other forms, you know, I'm afraid.
And when you say grab onto, you don't mean keep, you mean like be aware of.
To
Target.
Work on.
Yeah, to target.
I mean, work on. Yeah,
Yeah.
to process.
Because should or shouldn't always has some kind of judgment, like that
Right.
something should or shouldn't be a certain way.
Should on
Right.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I should have done this. My spouse should have done that.
Another good sense is anything that has a label. Oh, you know, he is lazy.
Yeah.
Right. Any kind of negative label is a really good sense, even if it's about yourself. And so, yeah, any kind of frustration or insecurity, if you can just put it into a simple sentence, that's kind of the first step. Okay.
Okay.
And then basically there's these 5 questions. So what's a good sentence we should do?
We can use my mom's, like,
Okay.
my mom should not expect me to come over, drop everything, come right now.
Okay. So maybe can we shorten it? Let's see. My
Sure.
mom shouldn't
This is where the coach part is
Yeah.
good, because they can take what is there and help you kind of refine it and really target it really well.
my mom shouldn't demand my attention now.
Immediate, yeah.
Immediately. Okay. My mom shouldn't demand my attention immediately. Okay. All right. So first question is it true? It's just yes or no. So I don't know. Do you want to actually do it?
Sure.
Okay. Put it
We'll
around
do
the
a
spot.
shortened version of this.
All right. So is it true? My mom shouldn't demand my immediate attention.
Well, right now I feel like yes, it
It's
is true.
Yep. And the idea here is we're not going to judge ourselves for the answers. There's no wrong answers. We're just trying to connect with that pain. Okay.
We're just trying to say yes or no, not come up with reasons behind it too. That's one thing he taught me is like, just answer for you right now. Is it true for you?
Yes
Okay,
or
so mom shouldn't be demanding. Is it true?
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the second question?
Second question is, can you absolutely know that it's true? My mom shouldn't be demanding of me my immediate attention. It's absolutely true.
Like, is it absolute truth? In other words.
So
Yeah, can you prove
I
it?
know that this is something that I'm feeling, but I'm a faulty human and I don't know. No, I can't absolutely know that it's true.
Okay.
It's just what I feel, but I cannot absolutely know that it's true.
And
Okay.
just, like a lot of times people still say yes, right? There's no wrong
There's
answers.
no wrong answers.
Even if they answer no to the first question, that it's not even true, it's still useful to go through it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the third question is, how do you react? What happens when you have that thought, my mom shouldn't demand my immediate attention?
I immediately start to feel stressed. My anxiety, I have an anxiety disorder, so it starts out right here and jumps up to here immediately within seconds.
Yeah.
And I get immediately frustrated with her. I get angry. My body gets tense. My head starts hurting because I feel this pressure, this demand, this tremendous expectation, that I know that I can't. Don't think I can meet right now. So
So the thought is hurting you.
yeah,
Yes. That thought triggers, it causes a reaction.
emotional and physical pain.
And so you can go into it deeper, maybe we'll kind of shortcut it, but yeah, like you try to get it all out, it's almost like a little venting of not going into all the details in the story, just what is the reaction? What are all the emotions? Is there powerlessness? Is there feeling trapped? All these things that, you might
It's
be feeling.
identifying all those reactions,
Yeah.
physical, emotional,
And
mental.
what's the fourth question?
Okay, the fourth question is, how would you be without that thought? If hypothetically your brain couldn't even register that thought at all, she shouldn't be that.
No circumstances change.
Right.
But that thought, if it was not in my head at all whatsoever,
How would you be?
I wouldn't feel stressed. I wouldn't have physical pain. I would feel freer. I would feel more loving towards my mother.
But she's
I
still
would
going to
actually-
be calling up and saying, come over here right now.
Yeah, she
But
is.
if I can't think that statement, then I would be like, well, Mom, I really can't do that right now. But I will do it. I will help you as soon as I
So
can.
it puts you in a place to make a better choice about how you handle it.
It gives you peace of mind, so you can think clearly.
But it's
And
helping.
by the way, I was just playing devil's advocate. I understand, I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm
No,
for
you're
the
good.
benefit of the audience, like, so that's what changes, is it changes
Yep.
how you think about it and therefore how you act.
The purpose of that question is to identify it, to,
And we're not actually removing the thought with question 4. We're not even trying to remove it. We're not trying to do anything. We're just trying to
identify it.
imagine. We're creating a
thought
hypothetical
experiment.
reality. How would I be? And maybe I'd like to be in that place. I don't know how to get there. I have no idea how to
Yeah.
get there. But what if I could? Where would I be? Where would I end
what
up?
would it feel like?
Yeah.
Would
So-
it, yeah.
And then I would think naturally people say, well, then gosh, I'm going to get rid of the thought, or like, I'm going to replace it with
Amazing.
something.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
creates a desire.
A desire,
Is what
yeah.
it does.
It doesn't
Yeah.
tell you how. That's what question 5 is for. But question 4 and 3 show you how much it's doing to you and how much it could help you to get rid of it, right?
Yes, got it. Okay, and then 5 is?
Okay, number 5 is it's how is each turnaround true? And I basically teach 4 turnarounds, okay, A, B, C, and D. So turnaround A, you turn it all to yourself. So you put yourself in her spot of the sentence, but it's all about you. So instead of my mom shouldn't be so demanding, of my immediate attention, it's
I shouldn't be in demand of my immediate attention.
Right. So how is that true? That you shouldn't be in demand of your own immediate attention.
Well, this, it has the same reaction, that it shouldn't be true, because it'll make me feel the same way. I shouldn't, because I don't want to cause myself discomfort or pain, physical and emotional and stuff. So it's not true that I shouldn't do this.
Right.
But it's hard to think about. It really does. It takes a second to think about, okay, how is that true? And that thinking process is the important part. It is analyzing, how could it be, how could this be true? And there's purpose. And when you're in my spot, it doesn't make sense right away. But the biggest thing is trusting the process.
Okay, and the second question would maybe be, I shouldn't be demanding of her.
Yep. Part B is you swap the names. Yep.
Yep.
So how is it true that you shouldn't be so demanding of her immediate attention?
Okay.
That's fairly obvious for me, just because I feel so strongly about, expectations and stuff. So I absolutely should not be demanding of her, because I don't want to make her feel that way.
So you feel that is true.
Yes, I absolutely feel that is true.
And you also feel you shouldn't be demanding of you.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. And then how do you turn the other 2 around?
Okay. So part C, we add the words in the past to the beginning of the sentence, and you switch it to be positive. So in the past, my mom wasn't demanding of my immediate attention. So what are some examples? What are some times you can think of when she wasn't that way?
Well, there was one particular time, and this has happened actually a number of times, is my mom has some physical problems. She's handicapped. She has MS and diabetes and stuff. And so, she has a lot of health issues. And so she can't reach her toes. And so she asked me to come over and help her clip and paint her toes and stuff like that. Seems like it's just so menial, but it matters to her. And so she'll ask me to do that. And I remember one time she asked me to do it, and I says, Mom, I would love to do this, but I can't get over there right now. I just can't. I'm in the middle of this right now. And so I can't, but I will, I will do it. And she was like, and a lot of times before that, she'd be like, well, I really need it done now, but this time she was like, okay, well, just let me know when you're going to come over, just let me know as soon as you can,
Nice. Nice. Okay. Can you think of 1 or 2 more? Maybe.
Well, and then the next question is also in the past.
Nope. So, okay. So basically with that one, you want to try to see times
Patterns.
when it wasn't that way. Right. And it really helps so many times to say, wow.
Kind of can be any evidence that she's not always demanding.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
takes things
yeah.
from absolute and
Mm-hmm.
what it's doing is it's opening up your mind.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of these questions, is to open up your mind so that you can free it.
Right. And so,
Yes.
so many times people will find, oh my gosh, you're right. That time they weren't like that. Oh, that time they weren't like that. Oh, that time they weren't. And sometimes they can come with a whole bunch. And
Right.
it's like that overwhelming evidence, like, wow, I've been really hard on them. They're actually not, they actually have a pattern of doing it the other way in many situations.
Yeah,
right?
I love looking for evidence, also even for affirmations. If you're not quite sure if you believe an affirmation that you want to believe, saying, I am seeing evidence in this life, or in my life, this is true. And so it's kind of the opposite, but like the idea that you're looking for evidence of what you want to believe, just like you're looking at evidence of things that you want to be able to see differently.
Right.
And so affirmations trigger your subconscious to look for evidence to support the sentence, right? The same way, I prefer questions. So this question of, in the past, they weren't this way, that still triggers your subconscious to look for answers to that question. And so anyway, so I really like, but yeah, either way, your subconscious is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it has that a way of doing it like
And
in
so
its
what
own
we feed
like,
it is really important.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
What
So
you're
what's the fourth question then?
okay, so the fourth one, you negate the verb. So instead of she shouldn't be demanding, it would be she should be demanding. So how is it true? My mom should be demanding of my immediate attention.
And sometimes this is a little bit tougher, this one.
Yeah.
But once again, we're trying to open up our mind. So we're trying to open honestly to think about something. So, and this one's a tough one for me.
We haven't worked on this at all. This is on the spot.
This is a new one. I would say she should be demanding. I would say she should be demanding on my immediate attention when it's important, when it matters. You know, if it matters really a lot to her, whether or not I say yes or no, you know, she I won't say she should, but she, you know, she should or she can, you know, she should be able to say, this is really important to me. I need this done right now, you know.
And I love that. And I think you could also almost always answer it with, well, of course she should, because when she does it, then she is doing that. You know, like I think almost you can always answer it with, well, of course my kids should talk back to me because they are, or like, you know, it's
yeah.
So what Byron Katie, you're leading to what Byron Katie talks about with arguing with reality. The reality is that they are.
They are.
If you argue against that, if you're saying no, they shouldn't be at the way they are, then you are arguing with reality, which I love how she says this. When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time.
You know, I want to jump in on that point because I think there can be a lot of nuances to this, and when your mind opens up, you make discoveries you may not have expected. But I've had to do a lot of thought work like this recently. As you guys may know, my 24-year-old son passed away at the end of August in a tragic rock climbing accident. Now, for me to say that I'm not going to feel any pain over that, well, I'd have to be an inhuman monster to.
It's unrealistic.
No.
And I know that's a judgment I'm making there, but
well, it's also a choice. He doesn't want to not feel pain because the pain means he loved.
Sadness is love.
pain is a reminder of what he meant to me and means to me. And so yeah, part of it is I choose to keep that wound in my heart. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be happy. It doesn't mean I can't be happy ever again or my normal self. But the kinds of judgments that I think are going to make that pain more severe than it needs to be and more long lasting and all of that are things like he was too young to die. You're not supposed to have to bury your children.
Yes.
It wasn't meant to be this way. You know, somehow the plan of God has been thwarted in, you know, there's a variety of different ways.
That day,
Right. There's
Shouldn'ts and shoulds.
and there's so you know, we can try on a lot of these different thoughts like, well, why should he have died?
Yeah.
And I have a lot of thoughts on that are more supportive than, well, you know, he was too young to die and, you know, life wasn't supposed to turn out like this and all of that.
Well, because all of those are really arguing with the reality of the situation. Like
By opening your mind that way too, you're actually making it easier for you to discover the actual truth. You might not get the whole truth because you won't get that till, you know, we're in the next life when the Lord enlightens us and everything. But by opening up your mind and kind of doing those turnaround type ideas, is you're opening up your mind not only to the actual truth, but it helps in your grieving process. I'm really big on grieving because I've had to do a lot of it myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think grief that is like, man, I miss him. It's hard to think about going the next 50 years without him, or what, you know, whatever thoughts I might come up with. Those are, you know, those are painful, but they're relatively clean.
Like there's clean and there's dirty pain, and the clean is examined and I think more thoughtfully and intentionally chosen in line with reality and then the dirty pain is that argument that we have and 100% of the time we're losing.
Yeah. I like that term, clean and dirty pain, because it really, it kind of shows on how it affects you. Is it, I call it good owls and bad owls when I was in massage therapy. Is it when you're getting massaged, does it feel like, yeah, it hurts, but it feels like it's doing something for me, or is it, ow, it's hurting me more, So there's healthy pain and there's unhealthy pain. So
Syra taught me, I don't know if is it okay if I quote you on this? Yeah. So one of the things that I have a tool that I've documented from what she's taught me about it. But one of the parts of this tool about effective grieving is she said, the best way to grieve is allowing yourself to mourn, but to process it without letting it consume you to the point of losing hope or going into depression. When mourning, it's important to allow yourself to feel whatever you need to feel without judgment or guilt. After you get through feeling it, you will get to the point of having an emotional release, often indicated by exhaustion. At this point, you have a choice. You have a choice to stay in pain and sorrow. It can change your chemical state and lead you to depression. It is best, even before the initial grieving, to have already decided that after you release, you will get up and get moving again.
I want to tell you something about this because that really resonates with me right now. When I went through my divorce, I had about 4 years of deep depression and didn't know how to find my way out of it. And I mean, gradually I figured it out, but it was more painful than I think it needed to be because I stayed stuck in it. And you said something about not letting it consume you. Well, it consumed me. That was very, very much the way things were. And so everything in my life got harder. I mean, I didn't feel like going to work, so I didn't. I didn't feel like paying my taxes, so I didn't. I didn't, go down the list, and I just created huge messes. And it was all thoughts about my life's ruined because of this divorce. And, it's all her doing that this happened and, all of that sort of thing. Well, when Henry died in August, Cathy can remember me saying this. I had said to her actually about another situation. I've seen what it's like when you approach your trials with weakness. And that's not someplace I want to go. And but by weakness, I just mean allowing it to consume you.
Right.
And so I said, I'm gonna be intentional in how I handle this. I'm gonna give myself an hour a day to grieve and feel my feelings.
Before he passed, in a different situation, he said, I'm going to respond with strength. And he said it so powerfully. And then a few hours later, we found out his son died on top of this other trial. And then a few other trials happened right after the funeral. It's like, whoa, like he
kind of preparing you
strength with the first one and then just carry it all through. And he has.
Yeah, I mean, one thing
process that I learned it in my divorce, because I didn't divorce my ex-husband because I didn't love him. I loved him dearly, but he was abusive and had addictions. And I knew that I was not going to survive. And so I knew that I had to grieve. You cannot skip grieving. No matter how much you think you can, it will get buried. It'll come back and bite you later. But by doing it
sideways,
by doing it the way that I was saying, you are actually giving yourself permission. It's okay to grieve. This is the time frame I'm setting aside to allow myself to feel whatever I feel like feeling. Be angry, scream. This is where God will understand if you're screaming and swearing at him. He really will.
He can take it.
Yeah, he can take it.
He's not avoiding any of that. And he's responding with strength. So it's like both. Like, I love that he took 2 weeks off work. He did nothing but think of Henry and plan the funeral. And then we went up and we did the funeral. And then he came back and then he's given himself up to an hour every day.
Yeah.
Feel his feelings. And then the rest of the time it's life. Life's still happening.
I've tried to get back to my normal life and it bleeds into my normal life once in a while.
And it will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of that's strength. Honestly,
it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And every day at lunchtime, I go to the gym and pump weights or run on the treadmill or whatever. And that has been part of trying to show up with strength for mood management, all of that.
Mhm.
And that's a lot better than moping on the couch. And it doesn't mean I don't hurt, doesn't mean I don't feel the feelings, but that's one of my outlets for that and raises my mood and my endorphins and all that. And that is, I have desperately needed over the last few months.
And in A Grief Observed, he read, and this really resonated with me.
By C.S. Lewis. By the
Yeah.
way.
So C.S. Lewis wrote a book called A Grief Observed. And in it, he says, you can connect with your loved ones and they will show up when
Yes.
you're living your life and not living in deep grief.
Yes,
Yeah.
they really do. When you get to that point where you're opening up your mind, it allows them to do that, to speak to you. And that's why I think even before I started my grieving process with my divorce, I decided before I went into it, I says, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to feel these things and I'm going to feel like dying sometimes. But I made a decision before I started that when I got to that exhaustive state, is what I call it. It's kind of like where you've just released all this energy in whatever form. Afterwards, you feel kind of like this exhaustion, you feel drained and stuff, but that's the point that you've released it. That's where you decide beforehand, okay, now is the point where I'm going to get up and I'm going to do whatever it takes to change this state of being, my physical state, my emotional state. And I'm going to get up. and I'm
Stubborn
gonna
about
go
your joy.
I am so stubborn about my joy. It's
Love
not
it. That's the get up and get going part. Like you're just like, okay, now it's time for joy.
Now
Like
it's time
I've
for me
done
to
the
get back.
feeling.
And I found that the grieving process actually, and this is how you can know for future reference, this is how you can know you're making progress, which is hopeful, is that because it'll keep coming back, is that you'll notice that each instance, they're close together, they're intense, and they're sometimes long, but with each time it gets shorter, it gets further apart,
yeah.
and shorter
Yeah.
in duration.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and then further apart, and it gets lighter, and that's how you can judge, I am doing better, and you can take pleasure and joy in knowing that you are progressing. And
I want to show you something that goes along with that. Have you ever heard of the figure 8 in grieving? Okay, so the middle point is where you feel
It's a
you
sideways
really,
figure eight.
yeah, it's a sideways figure 8. In the middle is where you feel really feel the pain.
Right.
And the rest is life, right? And so when Henry first passed, or when you were first divorced, or like when anything like really like traumatic happens, we're like this. I mean,
I was
it's just like
bursting
in and
into
out of that
tears.
pain all day long, every
Bursting into
day.
tears every hour.
And then
Yeah.
as time goes on, and especially if we do the work necessary, this pain just ends up kind of coming
down.
around like so, and then it ends up being so slow that like maybe this center point where we feel pain happens every 6 months, and then maybe every year, and then maybe every few years. And I do think when it's like a really big loss, I think that there's always going to be a little bit of that there, right? But like the rest of life moves on, and you're not in that like, whoa,
Right.
on a
Right.
roller
You're
coaster.
feeling dizzy. You can't
Yeah.
see up from down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really just love that visual, like that. I mean, it just
I like that too.
slows down, and it does. It feels like when it first happens, life is just throwing at you so many feelings all at once, and
Right.
then it just kind of slows down and becomes like part of your life rather than all of it.
Right.
Yep.
You know, my little brother died when I was 26 years old, 29 years ago. He was 17 at the time. Now I can still have a moment 29 years later where
Yeah.
I think of him in a certain way and get a lump in my throat or feel teary. And so I'll stop when that happens and have my moment. And then I'll go on about my day, and it doesn't ruin my life. It doesn't even ruin my day.
In fact, in
It's,
some ways, isn't it it's sanctifying, I think, to
It's
take a
beautiful.
loving
It is beautiful.
relationship and feel
Right.
pain because there was love.
Because it existed and it meant that much to you. It's just beautiful.
yeah, and I mean, that will happen to me, 3 or 4 times a year or something. Now it's not ever present.
Right.
It also, I think, morphed after a year or so from a intense kick in the gut to sort of a mournful longing,
Yeah.
a softer kind of grief.
That's how you know that it's progressing.
And I think with my son Henry's loss, I feel like having that roadmap already in front of me, I know better what to expect and what healing looks like in this situation.
It can give you hope.
Yeah.
Like that it's not so bleak that what you're facing, that there's something beautiful on the other side of this grieving process.
Yeah, I want to share something.
Yes.
And then we can go back to the fifth question so we can wrap it.
Yeah.
I think we actually wrapped.
Oh, yeah, no, we covered it.
Yeah, we got it
The
done.
fifth one?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. The 4 turnarounds was the fifth
okay.
one. So one thing that I learned from Brooke Castillo, she has a podcast, thelifecoachschool.com.
I listened to it.
Yeah, so one of her episodes, or earlier episodes, is talking about anxiety. And one of the most beautiful things I learned is that there are 4 ways to respond to emotions, right? One way is to escape, right? To avoid, right? And that's where we turn to binge watching or
Coping.
emotional eating or drugs or pornography or whatever. Like we're just escaping, we're checking out, which is pushing the snooze button. The problem doesn't go away, it just beeps again, and 10 minutes later or a day later or whatever it is. So that's the escaping. The second one is to judge ourselves, beat ourselves up because we're having the emotion. Oh, I shouldn't be so angry. I shouldn't be depressed. I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I can't believe I'm such a failure. I shouldn't be feeling this or that.
Judgment on ourselves.
Right? And that just compounds the problem, right? Super unhelpful. The third one is to just act it out and kind of wallow in it. We've kind of talked about that one, right?
Mhm.
And then the fourth one is to allow it. And the word allow is so powerful because it's
Yeah.
your choice, right? I'm going to choose to allow the emotion to happen within me, to allow it to pass through, to have its time, right? Because emotions have a purpose. Every single
Every
emotion has a
emotion.
purpose. And if we
What's the
try
name of
to-
the episode in case anyone wants to check it out?
it's something anxiety. If you just search for the word anxiety, I think it's episode 14.
Okay,
on-
so Brooke Castillo on anxiety.
Yep.
Okay.
It's a beautiful, we listened to it on the way to or from our honeymoon, and it blew my mind. I was like, yes.
Brooke is a very smart lady.
Yeah, and I want to listen to that for the purpose of, I know some people, especially with this work of coaching, we get in our heads and we're all about like the thought work, but it's not the only thing. We also have to be able and willing to identify and feel our feelings, and not all of us want to do that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I learned in coaching really recently, actually. I think September last year is when I made a huge transformational improvement in being able to empathize. I'm very much, I found that I didn't, when I jumped into trying to help them and fix the problem without taking the time to just sit there with them in their pain, just meet them where they are and just sit there,
Be there with them.
and empathize, it makes an enormous difference, just an incredible difference.
Oh yeah, when you really feel with someone, I think
Yeah.
that you can feel it together and you can sense that you are.
When you share it, it's always lighter.
Yeah, and what I realized too, which is kind of interesting, I think, is that when I wasn't doing that, it's because I was afraid of that pain,
Mhm.
and I was uncomfortable with it.
And if you're afraid of it, then how afraid are they?
Right.
Right.
And part of the reason why I was afraid of it is because I didn't have what God told me I had an empty bucket for empathy.
Hmm.
And the reason why I had an empty bucket is because I hadn't had someone, and partly is how I showed up, but I hadn't had someone ever really just sit there in my pain, just really. And, and I learned it when I was visiting my mom in California. And so I went downstairs and I was like, wow, I just learned something, Mom. And I could really use if you could hold me while I just tell you about all of my pain in my life. And I did it. It was like 2 or 3 hours. She just held me. She cried with me.
She
There was-
didn't.
Yeah, it was
anything.
amazing. And
Wow.
some of the things were even about her, that I was hurt from some things she's done when I was a kid, and she just
Filled your bucket.
Yeah.
and yeah, it
She
overflowed. Yeah, and it hasn't been empty since.
Nope.
It's wonderful.
And
Beautiful.
I would say to our viewers and listeners as well, that even if you don't have a mom like that, that's capable of that, there is someone
Someone in your
in
life.
your life. You can find a wise person who will sit with you in your pain.
That's when you go to Heavenly Father and ask him to help you to find
Find
that
somebody.
person
Yeah, and
that
Heavenly
has
Father,
safety.
yeah, he can do it somewhat, but I needed a physical, I needed a human to hold. It wasn't, Heavenly Father wasn't enough for me for that.
Oh, I mean, Heavenly
Yeah,
Father,
help
help you
you find.
find something.
Yeah, no, yeah, yes.
Yeah, and I want to say on that too, Brene Brown talks about how shame for men is one thing. It is do not be seen as weak, which makes it hard for us to do the kind of thing that Eric talked about having done.
And we personally see it as strength. And I think
Right.
more people should, like, well, and not should, but like, I really think it would be helpful if we all considered emotional health to be a strength.
Right, because it
Oh,
certainly
well,
takes a stronger person to open up. It really does.
Yeah.
And I will direct this to the women because sometimes they fall into the trap of needing us to be Superman.
Yeah,
And that if we ever show any vulnerability, we're not armor and nails anymore and we can't protect and help them
right.
and whatever. Brene Brown says, if I meet a woman who can sit with a man in genuine pain and vulnerability, there is a woman who has done incredible work.
She really has. She has held me while I've fallen. It is so incredibly beautiful. I agree.
And what's beautiful about it is that he's sitting there saying that this is beautiful, but I love that with him, he brings so much safety so that when he comes to me and he's come to me about judgments about me that he's had about me. And in the past with other people, I've been like, I immediately feel the need to put up a wall, defend myself, go, ooh, do I need to protect myself, you know? But he brings so much safety to the conversation so that I don't feel, I just know that he's not there to attack me. I know that he's there to express something that's causing him pain that he wants to get rid of. And that allows me to be able to show up that way and say, I hear you, you know, and
what
just
makes it safe, like for him to express himself in that way? How does he help you? How do you help each other feel safe? I actually wanted to touch on this before we finished.
Yeah, good.
So I think the real key is getting rid of those blinding judgments and expectations.
and being able to recognize them.
Yeah, you have to recognize them before you can get rid of them. But if you get rid of those, you cannot, you can't show up in a way that they don't feel safe. Like they're gonna, as long as they're open to it, they will feel safe if you show up that way.
Because you
And
realize
for you, it took an hour and a half of spiritual emails every morning for how long?
It was until November of 2021. So that was September, October. November. So 15 months of, until I woke up without anxiety.
Wow. That's incredible. And I think that it's really amazing that you said safety isn't something we offer like outside of us. Safety is something that we offer because we did something inside of us.
Yes.
we bring the safety because of who we are making of ourselves, what we're doing with ourselves, you know, because one thing that he and I have really emphasized with working with people is intent cannot be hidden. So no matter what's going on in your head, if you have judgments and expectations, whether you verbalize them or not, they are going to come across. So if you get rid of those judgments and expectations before, you're basically preparing yourself to be a safe zone for that person. And that intent very much comes across. You can't hide.
Well, and Jennifer Finlayson wife says it's human tracking. Like, and when we're in families and when we're in marriages and we're living on top of each other, we track behaviors. We track the way we're saying things, and we know deep down in our heart where that person is. We can't hide.
Right.
Right.
You know, and I think this is when I say it's a very hard thing to do, I don't mean it's impossible. I mean, the difficulty in it is our brain is 2 million years old and it's wired for survival more than for happiness. And so or with our brain, it's always vigilant. It's looking for what's wrong. And that is driving the judgments we make.
Yes.
And so we have to be very conscious and intentional. I mean, it's natural to do
Yeah.
that, but the natural man is an enemy to God. And so part of this, I think, is being very intentional about avoiding those self-blinding judgments and, whether
That's
they're
why I
about
was
ourselves or someone else.
identifying them part, because like,
Right.
it's crazy. We'll be having an issue, and anytime we feel, and this touches onto the balance thing that we're really big on, is that whenever there's an issue, whether we recognize it consciously or not, we feel the imbalance. We
Mhm.
don't feel as connected with the person. We don't feel as connected with ourselves or whatever. We recognize that imbalance, and it's really important to recognize, to identify and say, there has to be a judgment or an expectation in there that is not serving.
Right.
And by identifying that, then you can go, okay, let's find out where it's imbalanced. And then we have a whole process for,
Oh my gosh, I love that. So you're saying really in any situation when we're out of balance, there's a judgment or expectation somewhere.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. That's
That
a
makes
very-
sense to me.
and when you identify that judgment or expectation and eliminate it, balanced.
Yeah.
Balanced, restored.
Yes. Yes.
I love that.
We call that balance shalom.
Nice.
It means peace, but it means more than that. It also means wholeness and restoration. And so when you say balance restored, I think
That's
that's in
Studio
shalom.
C.
My word for 2022 was balance.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I don't think I had ever thought of judgment and expectation somewhere whenever there's imbalance. I'm going to ponder this a lot,
Oh.
but I think as I focused on balance, I know I've let go some of my own
Do
self-expectations.
you have any questions about that? That's one of our favorite subjects.
Yeah. We've got a whole rule about seeking balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it
Sometimes-
seems like the focus on that word has helped me let go of more judgment and expectations. Like it was like the same in reverse, like
Right.
focusing on balance helped eliminate some of that, at least for me.
Yeah, I think I want to mention that there's different areas of balance, right? And one of the things that she teaches with this tool, which I love, is first you address the physiological. It's like
Most
if you're
important.
in balance, if you're not in balance, like, okay, do I need to go eat something right now? Or do I need to drink some water? Or do I need to, just
Am I
breathe?
tired?
Just breathe,
Am I PMSing?
right? Just like need some pain medicine.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, that means taking off the expectation of I need to be doing my to-do list when I need to actually be eating
Yeah.
or resting or whatever.
I'm a
But-
broken record on that with her.
Well, I'm working on it.
By doing this in order, though, it's really critical the order that you do it in, because
Oh, physiological.
because when you take
Physiological first.
when you take that out of the picture, where that's no longer an issue, you've gotten enough rest, you've eaten or whatever, it just makes a problem this big, this much smaller to deal with, and it just
Oh,
makes
Oh,
It's
for
like the
sure.
hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, so physical first, then what?
Then spiritual,
Yep.
then emotional and intellectual.
And then spiritual, and then what?
Emotional.
Oh, sorry, when was mental?
Intellectual.
Intellectual and emotion
Men-
go together.
yeah.
We just have one category for those
Oh.
together. Yeah. Yep. And
Because like this, once you take care of the physical side, then I often find that when I take care of my
Oh.
physical needs,
Sorry, I just wondered if that was before or after emotional for you.
okay, so first is physiological.
Okay.
then
Second is spiritual. Third is both emotional and mental.
Mm,
Yes.
okay,
And- Yeah.
interesting.
And,
Okay.
and we have a bunch of different things, you kind of little check boxes. You can like
Yeah.
go
that you
through
go
each
through.
area to make sure that you've got it addressed.
Because when I've taken care of my immediate physical needs, then I actually find that I can hear the spirit better.
Mhm.
When I'm not tired, when I'm not stressed or anxious, then I can hear the spirit, and then I can tap into resources that we have these huge, beautiful resources that Heavenly Father gives us that we can tap into, so that when we go to the next one, which was intellectual and mental,
Mhm.
the job suddenly becomes even lighter. See
Right.
how each step it helps to lighten when you get to actually addressing the problem. You have just made it from this big to this big, and it seems totally manageable at that point. Well, you know, much more manageable.
So,
Yes.
so I bring that up because, you know, we said, so balance, you know, you want to think about it in all of those areas. Now, if there's an emotional imbalance, right, or some kind of a relationship problem, that is where there's judgment or expectation.
Mhm.
I just want to put that into context.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. And they can show up in the other areas, but they're not as prominent, and it's not quite in the same way.
I like the acronym HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yes.
Think yourself through each one of those letters and see if you've got something.
We're
going on.
constantly improving our list and adding to it or refining it, you know, because
Sure.
we're constantly coming up against new barriers or new obstacles. And we're like, we should really add that to the list to make sure that, like, if somebody is going through it, they can find their obstacle on that list and go, this is what it is, so that they can take care of it.
I
Right.
want to just mention, going back just a little bit, when we recognize that we have a judgment or an expectation, that is not the time to beat ourselves over the head that we have it. Okay, that's compounding the problem once again.
Does not
right?
serve you.
So you don't want to get, you want to accept and allow yourself to have judgments and expectations, just that they're on a high priority to address.
Right.
Yes, and having compassion with ourselves when we're becoming more aware of how we're not serving our best interest, when, you know, and how we're showing up is really a key component, because otherwise we might just get stuck in more judgment.
Well, the
Exactly.
whipping stick is not part of the process.
Yeah.
There is no place in that process of balance where it says, pull out your whipping stick and make sure you give yourself a few stripes, you know?
And that will get you balanced. No, it will not.
Yeah, we think that that's part of it. And it's like, no, it doesn't serve, there's no purpose in it, you know?
Yeah, well,
Like-
I would love this interview. I'm sure we could like talk more, and maybe we'll have another chance to do that again, but we do have to wrap up. So I was hoping that, and yes, absolutely, that is a key, like, to being more aware and really working on yourself is having self-love and self-compassion along the way and along that path. Now,
People out there that are
You-
that really wanting to know.
yeah,
work
and you
through-
had mentioned to me that, like, you had mentioned earlier, and this was just a tiny little snippet in the conversation, but I thought this might be a good thing to end on. You had mentioned you have to do the personal work in order to show up and be able to receive love from someone. And I remember when I was dating thinking, oh, I just want somebody to come into my life and love me. I just want someone to come into my life and be my partner. I just want to have someone to come into my life and be someone I can love. And because I have all this loving energy and I want to put it somewhere. And I felt like, you know, that, like, oh, I want to be able to love someone. And I had gotten that far, but there was this thought that came to me that you need to be ready to receive it. Like, that's on you. No one else can come along and make you feel their love for you.
And might I point out too, that you mentioned that you have all this loving energy. I love that. It's beautiful, because I thought the same thing. And the thing that we sometimes forget is to use some of that energy and redirect it back to ourselves.
Mhm.
Because what it does is it changes who we are inside and suddenly makes us more attractive to those same people that we want to appeal to.
And
know?
they get to receive their love, because when you give love to someone, the most heartbreaking thing is when they won't receive it.
Yes,
Right.
And
yes.
it's not on you, and you can't make them.
Yep. And the first and great commandment, or the second great commandment, is to love thy neighbor as thyself. If we love ourselves nothing, that means we're supposed to love everybody else nothing.
And to expect nothing.
But if we love ourselves, so we need to love ourselves like as much as we love other people.
That
It's-
means investing time, that means investing energy into ourselves, into improving ourselves and being better. I mean, I
And
know.
it's not like conceited or arrogant or selfish.
Oh, no.
It's the
No.
love that God gives us, that we came with access to, that he wants us to receive from him.
It's
He
our
wants
fuel.
us to receive through our Savior, Jesus Christ. He wants us to receive. the gifts he's offering and being able to receive the gifts other people are offering in his name and in that loving energy.
I call that spiritual confidence, because it's not arrogance. It's like, it's a peaceful, no need to be more or less than anybody else, but it's a peaceful confidence in who you are and who you are through God, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And we started our podcast, just so you know, with God is love, so are we.
Yes.
And we went on to cultivating love for thy God, for thyself, and for thy neighbor, and how important all three are. And they're really symbiotic. I mean, it's not like one is more important than the other. It's just that we can't miss one and then still have the rest healthy. Like, it's all important.
Let me ask you before we wrap up, if people want your services or would like to invite you to speak or anything like that, where can they find you?
Or they just want to friend Syra for her stubbornness with joy.
Addiction to friends.
Yes. So yeah, so you can find, so I have a website called ericpabstlifecoach.com. You can find me on Facebook, Eric Pabst Life Coach. And then of course you can reach out to Syra on Facebook, Syra May Mangus Pabst.
Yep.
And she's working towards doing her own like coaching business and everything. I'm not there yet, so yeah.
And I have my own single adult events that I do. Cancer's kind of put a pause on it right now, unfortunately, but I was doing them basically all over the US. And the last big one we did in Tennessee, we had people from 26 different states,
Wow.
almost 90 people that attended, and it was fantastic.
It was awesome.
And so even though I'm married now, that's still my passion. I plan on doing that. So I'm trying to stay connected with the single adult community for that reason, because my passion has not changed. Those 15 years sunk deep into my heart. So
Yeah. And
We
we
love
weren't
this-
there as long as you were, but we were there long enough. And
Yeah.
yeah, we've had this same passion.
We love to see how the movement is growing throughout the church. It seems like
oh, I know,
So awesome.
people are
stepping all
interested in
over.
including and helping the mid-singles to heal. And
It's beautiful. And you don't have to have a ton of money to do it. You just got to know how.
right. And on that note, I would like to say, if you've listened to this entire interview, you can see that Eric and Syra are a couple that connected over personal development and growth.
Yes.
We relate to that because that was our point of connection from the very beginning. And we just want to say, go and do thou likewise.
It's beautiful when you put in the effort and the work. Trust me, the things that I have this thing where it said, this is where 1 and 1 make 100.
Yeah.
And for us, 1 and 1 equals 11, which is more than the sum of its parts. And we were married on the 11th of May, and we're
Oh,
exactly
I love that.
apart. So that's our number. It's our synergistic number.
It's
Cool.
the same idea. Yep. It's where what you two separate, you're valuable, you have a value, but you put you together, the right combination, having done the right work, can just, the explosions, that beautiful,
Yeah.
true
It
stuff.
feels like magic.
Yes,
It
it
does.
is.
It does. It feels like Fog 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Remember Fog 9. And also remember that anytime is a great time for more love in your life.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to our guests, Eric and Syra Pabst.